the irrational element and the rational faculty. So the irrational element of man consists of the vegetative and appetitive aspects. The vegetative aspect functions as giving nutrition and providing the activity of physical growth in a person. The vegetative aspect of the soul follows the natural processes involved in the physical activities and growth of a person, whereas the appetitive aspect works as a desiring faculty of. So, in contrast, the rational faculty of man exercises excellence in him and further divided into two aspects: moral, which concerns the act of doing, and intellectual, which concerns the act of knowing. So, one rational aspect where a person can attain excellence is in the intellectual faculty of the soul. This excellence is attained through teaching, and there are two ways to attain intellectual excellence. First is philosophic, and second one is practical. Philosophic wisdom deals with attaining knowledge about the fundamental principles and truths that govern the universe, helps one understand in general the meaning of life. Practical wisdom, on the other hand, is an excellence in knowing the right conduct in carrying out a particular act. In other words, one can attain a wisdom that can provide us with a guide on how to behave in our daily lives. In carrying out a morally virtuous life, one needs the intellectual guide of practical wisdom in steering the self toward the right choices and actions. It seems that for Socrates, moral goodness is already within the realm of intellectual excellence. Knowing the good implies the ability to perform morally virtuous acts. Therefore, rational faculty of a person tells us that she is capable of achieving two kinds of virtue, the moral and intellectual. For Aristotle, therefore, a person is not initially good by nature. Any craft that one does can be perfected by habitually doing the right action necessary to be good in a particular craft. For example, being a good basketball player involves constant training and endless hours of shooting and dribbling the ball in the right way until one habitually does the right stroke in shooting the ball and the right tempo in dribbling the ball. The same is true with moral virtue. A moral person habitually chooses the good and consistently does good deeds. The Filipino term pag-uugali precisely reflects the meaning of moral character. One can have mabuting pag-uugali or masamang pag-uugali. Thank you!
So, good day once again. I am Pauline Palomar, and now let's talk about the moral virtue and mesotics. So, as stated by Aristotle, developing a practical wisdom involves learning from experiences. Knowledge is not inherent in a person, and knowing the right thing to do when one is confronted is not easy. So, we all know that moral virtue involves doing such things or actions right. But then, a moral virtuous person is concerned with doing an appropriate manner as or choices on such an action or such action. But then, practical wisdom helps her or him to do such things right. We all know that we are tend to make mistakes, but with practical actions or with practical wisdom, he can steer another ability to make the things right, to make the actions right. That was based on Aristotle. For example, is that Brother Armin Lustro, with his practical wisdom and experience, has observed the possible effect of television violence of young age, and he issued guidelines on television viewing for children. So he says that good values instilled on children are sometimes removed from the consciousness of young people. So this practical wisdom, he issued some guidelines for children so that he or children are not that totally affected by the television. So doing things or doing choices or doing things right or some just doing guidelines is just an example of practical wisdom to make things right so that children are not that totally affected or not so affected about the television violence. However, when practical wisdom guides the conduct of making morally upright choices and actions, what it identifies as the proper or right thing to do. A morally virtuous person targets the mitosis. Okay, so for Aristotle, the task of targeting the mitosis is always difficult because every situation is different. Okay, so the mitosis is depends on the situation or the circumstances where you are is. Okay, so mitosis determines the act on how you behave in that specific situation, even if it is excessive or deficit. Okay, so for example, you're angry. Of course, if you're angry, you are angry, but you must act based on the situations. That is how the misotis work and in moral virtue. Moral virtue is firstly the condition arrived at by a person who has a character identified out of her habitual exercise of a particular actions. So, in short, moral virtue is how we act, or no, it's about our character in that specific situation. Moral virtue involves our characters, our habitual characters. Moral virtue targets the middle or the mesotis, which is our feelings and emotion. Yet, the two has interconnectedness. However, these two have differences. If moral virtue stands for our character, yet misotis is the way we act in that in that specific situation, how we behave in that specific situation, or how we act in that specific circumstances. That's the difference between the moral virtue and the misotis.
Of this junction, I will be continued the lesson about the moral virtue and the mesotis. A moral virtue person target the mesotis, the rational faculty that serve as a guide for the proper identification of the middle is a practical wisdom. Virtuous person learn from her experiences and develop the capacity to know the proper way of carrying out her feelings, passion, and action. Rational faculties person, especially practical wisdom, making a virtue person develop their habit in doing good. And moral person, in this sense, is also someone who is wise. Habit is not simply born out repetitive and the non-thought of activities in a person. Aristotle says that habits are product of the constant application of reasons in the person's actions. Therefore, Aristotle's statement emphasized the importance of the intentional and rational behavior in shaping one's habits and characters. It highlights the idea that by constantly applying reason and moral principles in our actions, we can cultivate virtuous habits that lead to our virtuous and fulfilling life. Aristotle clarifies further that not all feelings, passion, and action have a middle point. When a middle is sought, it is the context of being able to identify a good act in a given situation. However, when what is involved is seen a bad feeling, passion, or action, the middle is non-existent because there is no good or misotis in something that is already considered a bad act. Aristotle states, but not every action nor every passion admits of a mean, for some have names that already imply badness, spite, shamelessness, envy, and in the cause of action, adultery, theft, murder, for all of these and such like things imply with their names that they are themselves bad and not the causes or excesses or defenses of them. It is not possible then every to be right with regard to them one must always be wrong, nor goodness or badness with regard to such things depends on the committing adultery with the right. Aristotle also provide example of particular virtues and the corresponding excesses and defenses of there are three examples. First is excess, second is middle, and the last is defenses. For the excess, there are three involved, which is the impulsiveness, recklessness, prodigality. For impulsiveness is a behavior tendency to act in sudden urge or desires without considering the potential consequences. For recklessness refers to a state of being acting without care of regard for the consequences of one's actions. For the prodigality refers to the quality or state of being wasteful, especially with money or resources. And also for the middle, there are three: the self-control, the courage, and the liberality rather. For self-control refers to the ability to regulate and manage one's thoughts, emotions, impulses, and behavior. Courage is the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain, being overcome by fear. Liberality is a quality of being generous, open-handed. And for the last is the defensive. And also there are three. First is the indecisiveness, second, cowardice, and the last, meanness. For the indecisiveness refers to the inability to make decisions or choices, often due to a lack of confidence, fear of working wrong. For the cowardice rather, lack of courage to face or danger, pain. For the meanness, a quality of being unkind, cruel, or towards others. Aristotle identifies the virtue of courage as the middle in between the vices of being coward and reckless. Cowardice is the deficiency in terms of feeling and passion. Therefore, one can always be excessive in her actions, but an act that is virtuous cannot go beyond the middle. Filipinos can be perchance of using superlative words like over, super, to the max, and sobra in describing a particular act that they normally identify as a virtuous. Perhaps, perhaps Aristotle's view on a virtue is requiring a clearer by which Filipino can be better understand.
To summing up, virtue ethics focuses on developing good character traits to lead a moral life. Instead of prescribing specific rules or focusing on outcomes, it emphasizes becoming a virtuous person. This means cultivating virtues like honesty, kindness, and courage, which guide actions naturally. Practical wisdom, or knowing when to apply virtues, is essential in virtue ethics. The goal is human flourishing or eudaimonia achieved through practicing virtues consistently over time. Unlike other ethical theories, virtue ethics prioritizes character development and the question of how should I live rather than specific moral rules. Virtue ethics has gained prominence for its focus on character development and the cultivation of virtues to lead a good and fulfilling life. It provides a unique perspective on ethics by emphasizing the importance of personal character and moral excellence as the foundation for ethical decision making.